Okay, welcome back to the War Report here on the Mentorship channel. We're going to be doing the very final episode of the War Report for Goons versus Horde. There might be a continuation of this war in the future, but I think for now it's pretty much finished for this episode of it at least. The last episode we made, people were saying there's not even a war going on. Nothing's happening. It's stalemate, boring, over kind of thing. Everyone's going to live next to each other forever. Well, things have changed since then. It's been a big update. This is the in-game map. It's the lovely new 2D in-game map. It's very beautiful, and we can see a little bit of sovereignty changes, which clues you in a little bit to what's gone on. I'm sure you all already know, but if you don't, Goonswarm have fully invaded, destroyed a lot of the assets in Horde territory, and Horde themselves evacuated. They attempted to do an evacuation to Vinal through M202 here, and that would have taken them a big distance away from their enemies, Goonswarm, who were coming from this area. Scalding Pass Innsmother Cache, they were going to come up here. This used to be, there you go, GTQ, that was where we used to hold off the Goonswarm attacks. I myself, I'm biased. I try and make these videos factual, so I do my best to keep them nice and factual. But there is a bias there. I was in Pandemic Horde. My corporation, Blackwater USA Booster, is now in Deepwater Hooligans, which is a low-sec corporation who live around here in Turner. But there is obviously an implicit bias against Goonswarm, so hopefully you won't hear any of that. Hopefully it'll just be facts. Yeah, we'll get on with the video. So what happened was on the, I believe it was the 11th. Let me just double check. I did have this up. So, yeah. So it was the 5th of November. The 11th is because that's when the big structures started to die. So the 5th of November, Horde announced they were going to leave the drone lands. Now we were somewhere around here in a Artake staging. Actually no, it was further up here, but we were in Artake, and we were previously in GTQ. We moved to Artake, which is kind of in the middle, and the plan that Gobbins told us was everybody needs to get to M202, which was two capital ship jumps. So we go bloop bloop and we get to M202. Now this was an announcement without any pre-warning for 99% of the alliance. There's a very small group at the top who had a pre-warning, because they're administrators and things like that, is my assumption, and they needed to start setting the way. There was a Creepstar anchored here in HD TAC J, and that was coming out a little bit after the announcement, and so there was an attempt to anchor the road. Basically, we wanted to be Vinal, and I think they wanted to go Vinal and then maybe through to Cloud Ring or Pure Blind. I'm not sure really what the full plan was, but the plan we were told was M202, we're going to be taking this regional, we're going to be getting into Vinal. So immediately after the announcement, there was a huge surge in numbers in our Artake system, and the move ups began. No organization to them at first. There wasn't any Horde pings for Titans to move ups or anything like that. It was all just people moving their own capital ships full of ships in the SMB. That lasted for, I think it was an hour and a half, about 90 minutes. And that was the amount of time it took for Goonswarm to react, and the Goonswarm's reaction was very clinical and fast, and they basically brought in subcat fleets as big as they could get into the drone lands. I think they very quickly reinforced everything in GTQ that would kind of cause us to catch them in a trap, like all the Ansiblix and stuff like that was all reinforced, and they made their way to Artake. So when they got to Artake, they started to sit on the undock with heavy interdiction cruisers and a subcat fleet to keep them alive, which is effective and is something you don't see very often, because the alliance who owns those structures typically will form a subcat fleet of their own and fight them off. And that did happen, but what happened was this move up situation, whenever there's a feeling of we're moving fully, we're leaving the fight, in any fight, there is always the early adopters, and there is always a lot of disorganization. So when the Horde subcapital fleets formed, I think initially they did win the field in the subcap fight. It was grinding, kind of really max tie-dye, and then the Goon Swarm started to bring capital ships and even super capital ships into the drone lands itself via the GTAQ gate, and the Horde leadership team, or the FC team, decided to disengage, which was there was a lot of upset about that. It was seen as we were going to have our big last stand kind of thing. They were going to jump dreadnoughts into us. We already had dreadnoughts sieged on the grid. You know, a lot of people were ready to throw down at that stage. The decision made not to, and then since that point, Goon Swarm held a pretty big camp on the Artake Keepstar, and I can't find Artake for the life of me. I could search it. Let's do that. Artake. There it is. So they held this really big bubble camp, basically. They just covered the Keepstar in bubbles. Makes it very hard to get any capital class ships out and any sub-capital ships. Not impossible. Lots and lots of ships did get out. There was constant flashes. If you were watching any of the streams, or if you were there, I'm sure a lot of people were there, you would see as the ship just disappeared. Because a Keepstar grid is a ridiculously large tether grid, and you can fly a capital ship well tethered until you get to the edge, and if you do get near the edge you can dock it and start again. And that's what a lot of people did. A lot of people used sub-capital ships to push the heavy interdiction cruisers so that they would be knocked out of the way of where the capital ships were, not bubbling them anymore, so then they could jump, and more people did things like booshing things. There's lots and lots of gameplay happening, even though it looks like a pretty secure camp from the outside perspective. It was it's a very, very difficult thing to really get fully secured. As time went on and more capital ships got out of that situation, the camp was able to be more effective, because the capital ships that were left were kind of followed, and you can't really get out if you're being followed by a heavy interdiction cruiser. So then we were left in the situation where there was a lot of people in M202, and we had no guidance from upper leadership as to the plan next. The Keepstar that had been anchored over here in Vernal died. It died to a fraternity fleet, and a Goon Swarm fleet also turned up, I think. And Initiative, I believe, was meant to come, and we went, and there was a little brawl over it, but nothing significant. So that plan didn't work out. There was no escape route there. Some corporations went up here. They went to HBTAC, and they went into Tinal, or they went down to UDVW. I think a lot went to UDVW, and they joined Fraternity. So they left Pandemic Horde, completely joined Fraternity. Still others went down to... Let me find it. Feel the game will let me. See, this is where the flat map is a bit trickier. Went down to Alex Q2, and they went out, jumped out to Pala over here. It's quite deep into the forge, really. My corporation Busa got a lot of stuff out various ways. Wormholes, pods were really easy. So the cloning station turns off once you hit armor, but before Artake hit armor, we've learned a few tricks where you can get implanted pods out without really any risk using tricks, which I'm sure a lot of players know about, but some don't, so I'm not going to reveal all the secrets of the game. But you can essentially bridge them through bubbles if you're clever. So there was a lot of evacing. A lot of stuff is impossible to evac in these kind of situations, so there'll be loads of structures that were left that were destroyed. We're going to go over those in a second. And there wasn't really any fight back, because everyone is convinced at this stage, with no alliance kind of messaging about it, everyone was kind of on their own. All the corporations were banned into themselves and looking after their members, and it was kind of assumed that it was done. And that was correct. That was the correct assumption. It was done. Once you have that kind of fail cascade situation where enough of the critical mass leaves, you're kind of done. And I think if you look back at the numbers for Horde against Goon Swarm were dropping in the previous 3 weeks before this. There was a steady decline in like people turning up to situations, fights, and Goon Swarm's numbers stayed pretty good. They had pretty good morale. Asher Elias, the leader of Goon Swarm, said that around this situation. This is not a perfect quote, but basically he said that they were going to plan to invade in the next 2 or 3 weeks, and they were disappointed that they didn't get the chance to do that with an opponent to defend. The truth of that, I don't know, but that's what he said. And it did. The numbers do seem to suggest that the fight was swinging their way. They needed to basically get across one of these regionals, and that would have been a huge effort for them if there was a defensive force in play. I think the Horde leadership team made the decision that their position was untenable to defend all this, and they thought this would be the play, and they were wrong. So that's kind of what happened. That was the 5th, and we're now on the 18th, so we're how many days is that? We're 13 days after, so 2 weeks essentially after the fact, and now we can really see the damage of that kind of collapse. So these systems that are glowing are the systems where sovereignty has changed. So there's been quite a lot of sovereignty change. It's not everywhere. Some of these would have gone quite early, but others will just not have gone yet because it takes ages to do sovereignty warfare. And this is it's 9 regions. It's huge, the amount of space here. So this will take time. Goons have also said outright that they do not want to live here. They don't want to capture it. I think they're just taking sovereignty in the kind of core areas they want to put stuff down, and then they're going to leave the outer areas for other people to figure out. If we look at what I did is I went through Zkill and I searched each region one by one and then put structure defs, and then I went back to the 11th. Well, I went back 90 days, but there was nothing really before the 11th, and the 11th seems to have been, if you reinforce something on that first day of the announcement on the 5th, the 11th is when they were starting to get destroyed. And as you can see here, there was a significant amount of structures have exploded. So Ethereum Reach was a large area of slice, and also a little bit of Pandemic Horde was there as well. Lots of Metanoxes died there, lots of big stings, Satios, Keepstars. The Cavella Expanse, I thought would have been bigger, but one of the big things in the Cavella Expanse was the Satios and the Fortizars. I know Horde leadership removed a lot of Fortizars and things like that. There was also 3 Keepstars there. Peregrine Falls had a ton of stuff, had loads of retirees, had a lot of people like lived here who rented originally. So there was a lot of that kind of industry going down. Loads of Fortizars because it's where the Pancrab Umbrella used to be, and there was a fort in every system for those. Tons of Tataras, which seems unnecessary to me. Like Tataras are for reactions and for refining. 17, it's loads. And then Outer Passage was more of a rental area. So there was tons of Athanors, moon mining, Metanoxes. When you're renting, you're kind of trying to eke out every little bit of this, so the Athanors are being actively moon mined. Loads of Fortizars, again, because the renters like to have Fortizars to dock their capital ships in. A few Keepstars, loads of Asbals, because renters like to build stuff, and a few Satios. Malpace was where NC lived. They really liked moon mining, they really liked Metanoxes. There was tons of that. Loads of Keepstars, Satios, again, they were quite set up. The Spire, a bit less, but you can see there's quite a bit of destruction there. Cobalt Edge, a load of moon mining again, like 50 different moon mining structures going down. Loads of Fortizars, some Asbels. No Keepstars in Cobalt Edge have died. That might just be not yet, or it might be that there weren't any there to start with. Geminate, there weren't any Keepstars in. Satios, there wasn't any significant infrastructure in Geminate because it was a borderland with Fraternity and it's next to Losec, so it's really easy to harass. But if you look at Metanoxes, there are 78 Metanoxes in Geminate that have died in the last few weeks. So really, really violent in Geminate right now. I think a lot of this is, some of it's Goonswarm, but there's a lot of smaller groups who are killing Metanoxes to take the moons for themselves because it's been kind of declared as a no man's zone. I know Test Alliance, who are part of the Fraternity Alliance, are in there leading the way for Fraternity. They're killing a lot of those. And Oasa was another rental area. Busa actually had a rental in Oasa, and so you can see there was tons of Satios there. These were quite established renters. So I think we've had a Satio die. NC was over there, I think. Not 100% on the NC, but that might be true. We also had a Keepstar in there die. Not Busa, but there's a Keepstar that died. And then tons of Asbels, tons of Tataras. This is your more established, bigger groups. What I did to try and give myself a rough idea of the scale is I've added them all up here. So you've got lots of structures that have died, and then I've added up what I consider the kind of core value, and literally that is the cores for a lot of them. So this is the definite ISK that's coming out of these. I feel like a lot of groups, when they put down a large structure, they kind of write off that structure's value. So an easier way to imagine the destruction is you can imagine like the smallest possible impact is that all of these cores are going to go to the winner, right? And then the rest of it you can either forget, or you can just imagine that it's like 4 to 10 times as much damage. Some of these are way more. So there was a Satio that died. Satios in theory are worth a core of 10 billion ISK, right? That's what the winner gets. There was one of them that died that had 700 billion ISK in. So obviously the scale on that is ridiculous. That's 70 something times more than the core's worth. But without trolling in particular each Z kill, which you're welcome to do, it's a lot of damage. You can work out the very, very minimum damage is 1.736 trillion ISK is how much cores has come out of this, which is nuts. Like 1.7 trillion ISK is like a big dread brawl, you know, a big dreadnought brawl, and that's the minimum. So likely the looted value is above 3 trillion easily, but it's probably even more than that. I don't know if I've got any other bits here that I had to look at. I don't think so. I think that's pretty much it. Since then, the membership numbers of Horde have dropped significantly. Horde has it's a couch situation. That is basically the initiative is letting them live in Cloud Ring, and they're not going to evict any Horde stuff from Cloud Ring, but it's temporary. I think the timescale is 3 months that I heard. I actually assisted Horde to capture this system, the faction warfare signature of Horde. They've turned this from Caldari into Galente, which has allowed them to have some faction warfare content right on their doorstep. And then an hour or two after that, I kind of signed off and left Horde, as that was my little pet project. And now I personally am down here in Turner with the Big Ab Deepwater Hooligans Alliance and my booster friends. So that is going to be everything for this war report. A lot of talking on this one. There always is a lot of talking. Big event, obviously, in the game. It's going to have an impact for a long time. This area is apparently going to be like a safari park. It's going to be up for anyone's grabs. But if you form an alliance that's a threat to Goon Swarm, they will come and kill you, basically. If it's too big, if you get too big for your boots, Goon Swarm lives right there, and they know how to get in, and they're going to leave these doors open for themselves. They're not going to allow anyone to set up and block these regionals. I'm confident of that. If you set up anything significant along this ridgeline here, then that's going to go. That's not going to happen. So I imagine it will just be Athanors and Astra Houses and Metanox Moons and a constant little brawl between all the small groups. I know that lots of groups are in there already. I've seen people make some pretty bad mistakes, like Minmatar Fleet Alliance bought a load of structures off Slice, and Goon Swarm had told everyone that they were going to destroy all of the structures. So those structures that were bought off Slice, they still died. So Minmatar Alliance bought structures that then immediately died, which was, yeah, that was stupid. Yeah. Hopefully you found this video interesting. This week, 2 weeks, has been chaotic for me and my group. It's been really, really fun. It's been really tiring. I ran about a week with 3 or 4 hours of sleep, which is foolish. Like, don't do that for a computer game. But I enjoyed it and made it through it. And our group has enjoyed ourselves, and we've come out stronger, I would assume. There's a lot of groups in Horde who have verbalized the fact that they were stagnant, and this was a death trap. Like this area being so defensive and having no real threats, and having no one really do anything to us, meant that 50% of their corporation was just AFK, just mining and not really getting involved in anything and having no fear. And I think that's why the losses and the bitterness, so that's the positive of it, and then the bitterness comes from that as well, because a lot of people were completely blindsided by the fact that in nullsec you can be evicted, because we hadn't been evicted for years and we felt indestructible in this area, that people just weren't ready to leave. So they had just way too much infrastructure and assets here, so that, you know, they had a few days to get out. They couldn't achieve it because they just had too many things to do, too many assets to remove, and Goons did a decent job of stopping it. But really, if you were outside of Ratake, there wasn't really much hunting going on. You could move, you could get out, but yeah, people just not happy. People returning to the game or have been on holidays and they're like, well, my gameplay is ruined now. Now that's because you've invested too much into it. I understand for people who have Titans and things like that, it sucks, but at the end of the day, if you can't afford the 15% asset safety fee on a Titan, then don't have a Titan. Like, it's the same rule that's always been the case in EVE. Like, if you can't afford to lose it, you don't undock it, you don't have it, because if that becomes your whole gameplay, having that one thing or that set of items, this happens. This your game is done, and you will quit the game over it. Like, you will rage out, and that is not the way to go. So yeah, so there's going to be tons of stuff coming into asset safety. It's all coming out. I'm not really sure. It's somewhere in low 6 Odebein here. Loads of it's going to Odebein, which obviously is quite close to Turner, which is good for us. Bad for a lot of people. That's going to be a very deadly system in the future. It's going to be very camped. A lot of the other YouTubers have said the same thing. I'm going to leave you there. Have a lovely evening. Hope you've enjoyed the last 2 weeks. I know I have. I know that a lot of the videos that have come out recently have been from the Goons perspective. They've attempted to be non-biased. Here's one from the Pandemic Horde perspective, attempting to be non-biased. Have a good day.